Hi, these are the notes for the urinary system, which is chapter 15 in your book. As we discussed today, the two functions of the urinary system are to eliminate waste products from blood and to regulate homeostasis, things like water balance and electrolytes, salts, potassium, things like that. There's not a lot of organs in this system. We have the kidneys, which are found here in the body, towards your back, the ureters, which go from the kidney to the bladder, the urinary bladder, and then the urethra, which is where the urine comes out of the bladder. So the kidneys are going to be the most important part, and they have different regions. The renal cortex is the outer portion of the kidney, and then you have the renal medulla, which is inside the cortex, and you have the renal pelvis, which is the inner collecting tube in the kidney and collects the urine. About a quarter of the total blood supply from the body passes through the kidneys each minute. And so the kidneys are really important in cleaning the blood, removing the waste, and regulating the water. So the renal artery supplies the kidney with blood, and the renal vein allows the blood to leave the kidney. You don't have to know all these. Just the renal artery and the renal vein are fine. Inside the kidneys are things called nephrons, and this is what they look like. They are the structural and functional units of the kidneys. They are responsible for making the urine, and they have a few main structures, one of which is the glomerulus, and one is the renal tubule. So if we first talk about the glomerulus, it's a knot of capillaries, and so here we have a arteriole coming in, or the afferent arteriole, and it goes into all these capillaries here within the Bowman's capsule, which is the first part of the renal tubule. And then the blood leaves through the efferent arteriole. So we're still in arteries there. Then the renal tubule goes from the glomerulus and it ends at the collecting duct. And there's different parts of the renal tubule. We start with Bowman's capsule, which is what we were just looking at. Okay, that's right here. And then we go through the proximal convoluted tubule right here. Then we go through the loop of Henle, which is this long loop here. Then we go through the distal convoluted tubule into the collecting ducts. The collecting duct received urine from many different nephrons. You can see the picture of that here. So here's a nephron and here's a nephron, and urine's going into the collecting duct. And what that does is it delivers urine to the calyces and to the renal pelvis and collects urine to go into the ureter. If we go further into the nephron, it's associated with two different kinds of capillaries. The first one is the glomerulus, which we already talked about, and then you also have the peritubular capillary, which is found here near the loop of Henle. The glomerulus is specialized for filtration, and so what happens is high pressure in the glomerulus forces the fluid and the solutes out of the blood. So here's the glomerulus, and here's the glomerular capsule, or otherwise known as the Bowman's capsule. And so fluid and solutes go from the blood into that capsule. In the peritubular capillary beds, those are some normal low pressure capillaries. And what they do is they absorb. So there's not stuff coming out, they're taking things in. They're reclaiming some of the substances that came out of the glomerulus, and they're doing that through the collecting tubes. So when urine is formed, there's three steps. First one is glomerular filtration, then tubular reabsorption, and then tubular secretion. Glomerular filtration is non-selective, meaning lots of things come out. So basically everything's coming out of the glomerulus. Waters and solutes, anything that's smaller than a protein, is forced through the capillary walls into the Bowman's capsule. But proteins and cells are normally too large to pass through, so they don't go through. And the filtrate is collected via the glomerular capsule and leaves in the renal tubule. Then, during tubular reabsorption, the peritubular capillaries reabsorb some of the useful substances, like water, sugar, amino acids, and ions. Some is passive, but most is active. So this is actively happening. It is an active process that requires energy. And most of this reabsorption occurs in the proximal convoluted tubule, so right next to the next part after the glomerulus. Okay, so we see that we have glucose and amino acids being reabsorbed or reclaimed, water, salts, whereas some drugs and poisons are going to go into the urine, as well as some hydrogen ions. Then water will come out in the tubular reabsorption in the loop of Henle, as well as salt. So things that are not reabsorbed include urea, all of your nitrogenous waste products, urea, uric acid, and creatinine, which is associated with muscle metabolism. Some materials, so in this third part, tubular secretion, some materials are going to move from the blood of the capillaries into the renal tubules, things like hydrogen and potassium and creatinine. And this is important for getting rid of substances that weren't already filtered out. And then anything left in the renal tubule at the end of the urine formation process is going to go towards the ureter, and we have created urine. And so you see this picture here. So we have potassium going back into the collecting duct and going back into the distal tubule. Salts are coming out. Urea is also coming out a little bit, and water can come out depending on your ADH levels. So for urine, in about 24 hours, you produce 1 to 1.8 liters of urine. Urine and filtrate are different things, however. So filtrate contains everything that blood plasma would, but urine is what remains after the filtrate loses most of its water, nutrients, and ions through reabsorption. So that reabsorption process is important for creating the urine. And it contains a lot of nitrogenous wastes and any substances that your body does not need. Urine has a yellow color due to the urichrome pigment, which comes from the destruction of hemoglobin, or the protein in red blood cells, and from other solutes. Dilute urine is a pale straw color, so that strong color is not something that you want to see. Urine is usually sterile, supposed to be sterile. It smells a little bit. It has a normal pH slightly acidic of around 6, and a specific gravity of 1 to 1.035. Things that are normally found in urine: sodium, potassium, urea, ammonia, and bicarbonate ions. Things that are not normally found in urine and can be indicative of diseases are glucose, blood proteins, red blood cells, hemoglobin, white blood cells, or bile. So those should not be found in your urine. So your ureters extend from the kidney to the bladder. They come from the renal pelvis and they enter to the back side of the bladder. It runs behind the peritoneum, and peristalsis, so actual moving of the urine, aids gravity when urine is transported. And so here's the urinary bladder. It's a smooth, collapsible muscular sac. When it's empty, it's about this size, and when it's full, you can see just how big the bladder can become. So it temporarily stores urine until it exits through the urethra. In females, the urethra is about 3 to 4 centimeters, whereas in males it's about 20. The location in females is just in front of the vaginal opening, whereas in males it travels through the prostate and the penis. So it's actually in the same passageway as sperm cells and semen. And that's also a difference between females and males. When you pee, it's called micturition. It's a technical term. And so what happens is your bladder sphincter will open, and your bladder muscles will contract to expel the urine. And so on an average day, you should take in as much water as you output. You take in water through your metabolism, through creating energy, through your foods, and through your beverages. So mostly through what you drink. So make sure you're drinking lots of water. And then you output urine about 1,500 milliliters, or 60% of the water loss is through urine. Some of it's through sweat. Some of it is just out of your lungs and skin. And some of it is through your feces. And those are your notes for the urinary system. So please come to class prepared with any questions that you might have.